Well, good afternoon, everyone. Congrats on making it to the final day of World Water Week and what will probably be your last session of the week, Navigating Waters, Unraveling Challenges on the Road to Collective Action. My name is Michael Matisich, Senior Corporate Engagement Associate on the Nature Conservancy's Corporate Engagement team. I know you all have probably seen one too many PowerPoints by this point in the week, so I promise to keep the slides to a minimum today, and hope you find this session engaging. So here's the agenda we have for today. We will kick off the session with a guest speaker who will provide their overview on what they're seeing in the collective action space. Then we will hear from a few companies on their perspectives from engaging in collective action and learn about the Nature Conservancy's Nature for Water facility and how it is helping organizations engage in collective action. We're going to have an interactive panel discussion with you all and take your questions. So please be ready to participate starting now. So if we can actually, let's give everyone a second. We're going to be using Menti today throughout the session. So go ahead, scan this QR code on your device, and then please keep it open on your device throughout the session today so you'll be ready to participate. Give you another second to join. All right, if we can go ahead and switch over to Menti. So before we begin, we'd just like to get a sense of who's in the room and who's online with us today. So what sector do you represent? So we got about a tie with NGOs, private sector. But I'm really actually happy to see a spread throughout all the sectors. A lot of sessions I've been in, at least this week, have been very kind of bipolar between two of those. So great to see everyone's represented in the room today. Thank you for participating. And let's go ahead and switch back to the slide deck. So yeah, as I said, just keep Menti open on your devices so you'll be ready to participate in future polls. So now I'd like to welcome our opening speaker, Colin Herron, Senior Water Resources Management Specialist, Water Solutions for the SDGs at Global Water Partnership. Colin will be sharing kind of what he sees in the collective action space, the current state of collective action, including successes and challenges, what is missing, and where we need to go. So thank you for joining us today, Colin, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And first, I hope that everyone can hear me okay. I'm dialing in from a really long way away from the Stockholm waterfront, about 2.5 kilometers away from the Global Water Partnership here in Stockholm. So thank you to the organizers for inviting me to say a few words here. I have to say that this is about my 15th World Water Week, and I think that today I finally completed my World Water Week bingo card because I've done, I think, every role possible within the World Water Week. Keynote speaker was the last one that was missing. So I think COE now owes me a cup of coffee. But thank you also to the audience for being here. And I'm very pleased to see that we have a diverse audience representing multiple sectors, which is part of the point. So I was asked by the organizers to say a few framing remarks, and they asked me to be a little bit provocative. So careful what you wish for, Michael and team. But I wanted to reflect that we're certainly seeing an increase in collective action on water and more engagement of the private sector in that context, which is definitely to be applauded. The World Water Week is a reflection of this. When I first started going to the World Water Week around 20 years ago, there were perhaps a couple of companies there, and mainly water companies, the Suez and the Veolias of this world. We started seeing increasingly then food and beverage companies, tech companies, and perhaps in waves. Now we could say at the World Water Week that we have pretty much any industry that has a relationship with water, which is any industry, represented during the conversations, which is progress. Appropriately, today we have a food company, we have a beverage company, and we have a tech IT company presenting. But getting collective action right is not easy. And if it were, everyone would be doing it well. In particular, I wanted to point to two bottlenecks that need to be overcome if we're truly going to unravel the challenges on the road to collective action. And I want to use those two challenges as challenges to the speakers. So first, there's what I call the integration challenge, which is around meaningfully engaging all sectors. There are surprisingly few examples actually where in collective action you can see a full and fair engagement of the four corner pieces of the puzzle, which are the public sector, the private sector, academia, and civil society. Engaging those four sectors clearly shouldn't be an afterthought, but it should be done in a way that serves the common good of all of those stakeholders from the very beginning of the process. That requires recognizing power and resource asymmetries, understanding different methodologies and objectives, but that is compatible, and that's what I hope we can dig into today. Secondly, there's what we might call the indivisible challenge around collective action across multiple sectors. So collective action often focuses on a single benefit of that approach. So we have water stewardship, we have carbon offsetting, we have energy efficiency efforts, we have agricultural enhancement, all of these focused on one particular sector. There may be benefits beyond that particular focus, but often those benefits are not accounted for because the donor is not asking for those benefits, is not tracking them. We need to break down that silo if we are truly going to make collective action multi-sectoral and indivisible. So in terms of what frameworks could be available to facilitate the overcoming of these two bottlenecks, coming up with a new one would certainly be complex, costly, time-consuming. But what if I were to tell you that there is a framework that already exists that allows us to do this? Furthermore, all United Nations member states have committed to that framework as an all-of-society effort. It has 17 goals, 169 targets, and 247 indicators. So, have you guessed it? Yes, it's the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and they have two key elements as defined in Agenda 2030, indivisible and integrated, key to solving those two challenges. Navigating the SDGs is not easy, and while they are rightly led by the public sector, they should be mechanisms for collective action, and every single stakeholder group should be asking, what can I do to contribute to the SDGs? Of course, entry into the SDG framework is a whole world of numbers, point something, then point something on top of that. I know it can be confusing, but I want to leave you with one final number, 6.5. Of course, here we're talking about water. It's the World Water Week. And 6.5 is the target on implementing integrated water resources management. Inherent in IWRM is multi-stakeholder partnerships for collective action. So if we can focus on achieving that target, we will be well on the way towards canalizing and channeling collective action towards multiple benefits across all sectors. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for your insights, Colin. Great context to start off the discussion today, and congrats on finishing your Seaweed bingo card. I'm glad you finally got that keynote speaker square. So now I'd like to introduce the rest of our panelists. We have Michael Alexander, Global Head of Water, Environment, and Agriculture Sustainability at Diageo. Eliza Roberts, Water Lead at Microsoft. Mike Nemeth, Senior Advisor, Agricultural and Environmental Sustainability at Nutrien. And Diana Madrigal, Engagement Manager at the Nature Conservancy's Nature for Water facility. So to begin, each of our corporate panelists are going to share their perspective on collective action, covering why they engage in collective action, how collective action fits into their water stewardship goals at their company, and how they have engaged in collective action to date. So Michael, can we start with you?
Thank you, Michael, and thank you everybody for coming to this last leg of the of the 5-day marathon. And Michael, I think you've got quite a tough job because I can talk about collective action for about 25 minutes. So
you got 5.
I've got 5. I've probably got I've got 4.5 now. Slowly it's becoming 4. So just very briefly, who's Diageo? Diageo is a global alcohol beverage company with brands like Johnnie Walker, Guinness, Baileys, Gordon's, and many others. And more important, we have operations around the world in about 30 countries. We have about 150 manufacturing sites, of which about 40 are based and are located in water-stressed areas. And that's principally India, Turkey, Sub-Saharan Africa, Mexico, and Brazil. So, and to quantify that kind of risk in very, very simple terms, about 1/3 of our volume is produced in water-stressed areas of the world. And we make alcohol from food crops or from other crops, and we have a very profitable business that is doing well, and we recognize that we have responsibilities locally, but we also recognize that in order to grow our business, we're going to have to collaborate more in these water-stressed areas. So why do we do it? Ultimately, and there's no apologies to do it for this, we ultimately do it because we want to grow our business in those areas. Our businesses contribute in terms of employment, GDP, and hopefully in many other ways. But importantly, we want to do it responsibly, and we want to do it across with our communities and with our supply chains. And we recognize that we're going to grow our business where water is scarce, and you don't have to be an Einstein to work out that we need a lot of water to make our products and our distilleries and breweries. Then we have to work with others across forums and initiatives that are collaborating with lots of different interests. That's civil society, other water users, government, regulators, NGOs, and others, to collectively and combined to address the climate and nature risks in those basins. We will not be able to grow our business and ultimately mitigate our climate risk unless we work with others. We have our own approaches in terms of our strategy. So our strategy is around water efficiency and water quality in our operations. It's around replenishment. So we have a replenishment program where we're spending lots of money doing lots of projects in lots of different countries, about 30 projects in 12 countries in the latest fiscal. But the most important thing I advocate within our business is that we need to invest in collective action, because without that, we're actually not going to mitigate our climate risk. Our biggest climate risk is water, either too much or too little in these very vulnerable communities, both in our supply chains and in our operations. And if we don't look at how we can collaborate with others to look at the systemic issues, to develop, if you like, a master plan with all different interests in that community, in that basin, then we will not mitigate our risk. And we want to support the resilience of our supply chains and the communities that support our supply chains, of course. But the singular kind of business focus and a North Star, if you like, is to mitigate our climate risk and ensure that we can grow our business responsibly in those basins. And then just very briefly, I think I've answered the first two. So finally, where have you engaged in collective action? And we have 4 goals for water efficiency, WASH, water replenishment, and the 4th goal is about collective action. And our goal is by 2030, we will be active in collective actions across 12, and now we've extended that to 20, unfortunately, but now 20 basins by 2030. Okay, so 20 basins where we have strategically important operations for our business, we will engage in collective action. What does that look like in practice? It looks very different in different places, and it's not perfect anywhere. But if we take in Kenya, where we're working with Upper Tana Nairobi Water Fund, or Water Trust, which is originally a TNC water fund, we're investing in upstream in the Upper Tana there. We're investing in projects with farmers that are not our farmers, but there are farmers that are using water that we need downstream in Nairobi for our brewery. So this isn't about engagement with our farmers and regenerative agriculture with our farmers. This is about us securing or improving the water health of the basin and security of the basin. In the Upper Godavari in India, where we're also working, just last Friday we kicked off an initiative in the Maharashtra where we are creating a project management unit to start a collective action, multi-stakeholder collective action there. We'd rather not do it, to be honest with you. We'd rather that a third party was there, but part of the challenge, and we can discuss this later, is there's a gap in convening organizations to pull together interests, because it's hard work. Someone described it to me recently as the thankless task of trying to get people together to sign on a dotted line to say we're going to work together. And then finally, I might mention Mexico and Guadalajara, where we're working with Charco and Benito to grow what already is a successful collective action of at least a dozen global companies, but wanting to grow that to do more than what it already does, to take a basin-wide approach. So I'm really excited by collective action, and I'm very happy to share some of the challenges that we're going to face later in the discussion. But it is absolutely fundamental to our business to invest in collective action for the future growth of our business.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Liza?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to all of the brave souls in the room who still have energy and are here today with us. We'll try to keep it spicy for you all. So my name is Eliza Roberts. I'm the director of the water program at Microsoft. And why does a lot of people ask, like, well, what does Microsoft have to do with water? Someone once asked me, actually, well, so is it? I mean, I know if water gets on a computer, then it doesn't function. It was really funny. So Microsoft needs water like all other companies. We need water to operate our data centers, to cool our data centers, and to operate our buildings and campuses across the globe. And so in 2020, we set a goal to be water positive by 2030. Our water positive goal is made up of 5 key pillars. The first is to reduce water use intensity across our operations. The second is to replenish more than we consume in 40 priority basins across the globe. We somehow have the same number. I don't know how that, oh, I thought you said 40, okay. So we're gonna try to keep it interesting for you guys. We're looking to provide people across the globe with access to water and sanitation services, engage in water policy, and drive innovation. So for collective action, we're looking to collaborate across many of the projects that we're funding. We recognize, as Michael had said, that we can do everything. We can meet a basin target in a specific basin and fund a number of different projects. Now, that doesn't mean that we're protecting that basin and protecting that basin's security in the long term. We know that we can't do this without working with others in those basins. It's not easy, and I'm not going to sit here and say that we've figured it out, because I think no company has figured it out. I think we all have a lot of work to do, but I think we're moving in the right direction. So I'll share a few examples. We've got a project, well, first of all, we're a part of a number of different projects through TNC. As many of you know, TNC has water funds across the world. And so we have contributed to a number of those different funds in Cape Town, South Africa, and many other parts of the world, in Chile, Santiago, Chile. And through that, TNC makes it really easy, right? They are bringing all these companies to the table. They are looking at what needs to happen in that basin, and they're bringing us all together and saying, hey, why don't you contribute some of your funding from your replenishment target towards this fund, or from another, it doesn't have to be a replenishment target, it could be any water funding towards this fund. And we will bring all of you companies together to support this project. And so that's one example of collaboration or collective action that we are a part of. And a really important one, because many companies don't have time to roll up their sleeves and do the hard work on the ground that's needed. We may want to, but getting support internally to do that when we have to reach our targets is really hard. Another example of something that we're kicking off, well, another example of our project is a company called Calimo. They do ag efficiency projects with farmers. And the Bonneville Environmental Foundation plays an important role here as a matchmaker, a broker. We were looking for projects to fund in Santiago, in the Maipo Basin, and they came to us and said, hey, you should talk to this company. And so we talked to them, and we co-funded Calimo's first replenishment project. We didn't necessarily know who else was co-funding, who BEF was bringing to the table, and BEF brought Google to the table. And so it's just an interesting example of 2 tech companies funding this ag efficiency project on the ground. And then I don't know how this fits into collective action, so maybe this is an interesting one for us to dig into later. But then this helped spur more companies to then support Calimo and fund more projects, not just in that basin, but in other places across the globe. And now they're working in Mexico and many other parts of the world. And then the last example that I will share is something that we're kicking off that I'm really excited about, and we don't have results from this yet, but leak detection is a global challenge. Roughly 30% of water is lost to leaks, and we're looking to be a part of the solution here, because a lot of water challenges are really complicated, but identifying and repairing leaks just doesn't have to be that complicated. And so there are a number of companies, including one called Fido, that leverages AI and technology to identify, prioritize, and repair leaks. And so we've launched a few projects with Fido in a few different parts of the world where we've funded those alone. Those haven't been collective or collaborative. But now that we've got that we haven't figured out, but now that we have some initial results, we're looking to scale that and bring others to the table. And so we're launching a water fund in the Colorado River Basin, one of the most highly stressed basins in the world that provides water access to over 40 million people, 30 indigenous tribes. And we're looking to bring others to the table to help leverage technology to tackle water challenges across the Colorado. And so this is being co-funded by Microsoft, by PepsiCo, by Fido, by Water Foundry, and there are a number of other companies that are going to be joining, so you can stay tuned for more. But those are just a few examples. Again, we have not figured it all out. We recognize it's really important, and really excited to be here to have this conversation with all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Well, Michael said he likes to talk about water collective action, and he said most of what I would like to say. But great points from both panelists, and great to be here, and thank you for TNC for having me here. A little bit about Nutrien. My name's Mike Nemeth. I lead our water and biodiversity portfolio across the company. That's both our manufacturing assets. We're a fertilizer manufacturer of nitrogen, phosphate, and potash, which supplies the agricultural value chain. But we also have the world's largest ag retail network that covers Canada, the US, Brazil primarily, in Latin America, and then Australia. And so that gives us a unique position, I guess, in the agri-food value chain, because anybody who's sourcing from an agricultural field, whether that's for food, fuel, fiber, or feed, we provide agricultural services to our growers. So not beyond just providing the seed and the chem and the fertilizer to grow the crops, we also provide soil testing and agronomic advice and digital solutions. And so why do we do a collective action? Because of our unique position, we've really focused on collective action as an ability to really test and incubate ideas of how do we support our grower customers, because at the end of the day, our customers are farmers. And so we need to understand as a company, much to what Michael pointed out, how do we grow our business and how do we keep it resilient? Because we operate in many areas where there are water stress basins. And when you do the quick and dirty analysis of where we operate and where crops are grown, by 2050, those areas are probably going to be more water stressed, and there's going to be other areas that aren't water stressed that maybe are. So we need to understand as a company how and where do we grow our business and how do we make our farmers more resilient through both products, solutions, and collaborations. And so collective action has really given us an opportunity to understand how do we create an offering where it works for the farmer. Because if it doesn't work for the farmer, it's not going to happen. How does it work for the farmer so that it can create value on the farm, where it's enticing for the value chain to be able to make those investments and to be able to scale up and do things, and where it makes sense for Nutrien to be able to play that role in facilitating and collaborating. So we've been able to use it to test it, not just positive water outcomes, but also looking at biodiversity credits and attributes and carbon credits and being able to tie that all together. So whether you're a company that has a regen ag program or a water goal or a biodiversity goal or a scope 3 emissions goal, you can use sustainable agricultural management practices on farm to generate the outcomes that benefit you as a company. So it's really looking at how do we support the value chain in our role. And some examples of that are two, both in North America for now. One in Canada, it's in central Canada, called the Lake Winnipeg Basin Project. Spun out with some other companies, including General Mills, Simplot, BASF, Syngenta, Maple Leaf Foods, and others, about looking at how do we, from a water stewardship planning approach, something that's credible based on the Alliance for Water Stewardship standard, how do we do something that's credible that can create value, and how do we do the valuation on those co-benefits, so the environmental, social, and economic co-benefits that come out of water stewardship planning and implementation on the farm. And then what's the value creation to the farmer? What's the value creation to the value chain? And how do we make that business case for the value chain to want to invest in water stewardship with multiple outcomes? And then another one is in the Mississippi Basin. It's a small sub-basin called the Lake Decatur Basin. It's an interesting project because it's a heavily intensified row cropping watershed. I think about 85 or 90% of it is row cropped. And at the end of it is a lake that has municipal and industrial applications. And there's everything from nitrogen, nitrate problems in the water, sedimentation. They just finished a $92 million dredging program to bring back the capacity of the lake, and I don't think the municipality wants to do that dredging program again anytime soon. So it's looking at how do we do upstream mitigation actions to be able to not just build resilience in agricultural value chains, but also minimize downstream impacts to illustrate that agriculture can be part of the solution, not just part of the problem. So.
Great. Well, thank you, Mike, Eliza, and Michael. You all made it very clear why collective action is important to each of your companies and shared some exciting examples from Mexico to Chile to Canada that I look forward to diving into more in a little bit. So for now, we're going to hop back to Menti. So I'll give you a second if you joined late, if you want to scan that. If not, it should still be up on your phone. And the next question, if you can please advance. Perfect, thank you. So the next question, we're going to talk about challenges now. So we'd like to hear from your point of view, your experiences so far. What are the main challenges you have experienced while engaging in collective action? And panelists, you're going to get the same question momentarily. So be ready and feel free to kind of look at what the audience is sharing with us right now, and feel free to respond in your comments as well to what you're seeing. All right, so we're seeing lack of trust, data, impact measurement, funding gap, stakeholder bias, competing priorities, meeting expectations, complex processes, shared vision, measuring impact. Great. Quite the wide range of responses here. So panelists, I hope you can tackle all of those in a few minutes, but feel free to keep those going. We'll leave them up for a minute. And then I guess we'll go ahead and switch back to the slide deck. And now we're going to hear from Diana and how the Nature Conservancy's Nature for Water facility is helping organizations and companies engage in collective action, while also addressing some of the challenges you all just shared with us now. So, Diana.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe you can, there. Thank you. So, hello everybody. My name is Diana Madrigal. I work for the Nature for Water facility, which is a global technical assistance facility. We provide support to organizations around the world that are developing or already running watershed investment programs, also called water funds. And overall, a water fund or a watershed investment program is a collective action. It's a financial and governance mechanism that brings different stakeholders together, public, private sector, local communities, to invest in nature-based solutions to address a water security challenge. We are a partnership between TNC and Pegasus, and so these two organizations came together to co-manage the Nature for Water facility. Next, please. So this is our current portfolio. We have been supporting watershed investment programs across almost the world. We aren't in Asia at the moment. This is our portfolio. As you can see, it's mainly focused on the Americas and in Africa at the moment. Hopefully this will change and increase. Next, please. So we have 3 focus areas. We have sponsored engagements, we have fee-for-service engagements, and we have a knowledge management area. So through the sponsored engagements, we have a call for proposals where organizations can apply for technical support. And this technical support is quite wide. Like organizations, as I was mentioning, can be in different stages in their willingness to develop a watershed investment program, or can be all the way in execution. And I don't know, like for example, a water fund that's facing a specific challenge that has been running for years now might be in the need of a new business case, return of investment analysis, a financial analysis, etc. And then we have the fee-for-service engagements, which basically it's the same theme, providing services to mainly private stakeholders that come to us with a specific request. And Diageo is one of our partners that we support in this area. And just as an example of what we do with Diageo, we help them scope for collective actions. And what this means is basically, as Michael was saying, maybe a corporate doesn't have the time to actually go and see what's happening, or even the same teams on the ground or the companies don't have the time to do that. So we take the time and look at opportunities for collective actions that are implementing nature-based solutions to address water security challenges. In some cases, we are successful, and there are easy plugins to actually recommend to Diageo, okay, this is the water security status of this basin. These are the projects that we found that are addressing this particular challenge, and this could be the change that is given through your engagement with this specific project. So those are the easiest cases, I would say. In some cases, we don't have collective action, but we might have a project that ticks most of the boxes and is being executed by a trusted organization, and it has potential for collective action. So that's another recommendation that we suggest in some cases. And in some cases, there's nothing. Such was the case of India in the Godavari, where we, unfortunately, we're not finding that big collective action opportunity. And the suggestion in that specific case was joining small projects or actually creating a collective action. And Diageo was brave enough to choose that avenue, and that's what they are working on at the moment. So overall, this is the services that we provide. And then, yeah, we have the knowledge management stream, which aims to open source everything that we do, all our tools, and to put them out there for other organizations to actually use. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Diana. So we're going to talk about challenges, and I know you kind of shared how the facility is helping overcome some of those challenges the audience just shared. But looking back, a few people continue to respond online and from the audience. So just to refresh kind of the results we saw from that poll, a lot around challenges of a shared vision. Oh, great. Thank you. That was quick. Thank you. Yeah, so want to highlight the two biggest ones coming up, data and lack of trust. So most people were responding with those two, but feel free to kind of comment on any of those. But yeah, so same question to you all. What challenges are you seeing when engaging in collective action? Lots of topics to include those. Some other ones you might consider, funding and return on investment, reporting, including understanding and reporting on the stacked benefits. I know Mike, Michael, you guys, I think all of you kind of touched on co-benefits at some point. So looking at like carbon, biodiversity, et cetera. And how and when to engage the public sector. I would be curious to learn more about that as well. Eliza, can we start with you?
Sure. Okay. I think also this is the first time I've ever been on a panel with 3 Michaels. So I just want to, no, it's not a problem. It's just funny. I'm just trying to make a joke because I know everyone's tired. And to Deanna, sorry. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting ones here, and I think they probably resonate to many of us. I think lack of data, I'll just speak to a few ones. I mean, I think lack of data is challenging. At Microsoft, as I said, we have these 40 priority locations, and we know, obviously, that we picked them, we narrowed them down using an in-depth risk assessment. We know that they're high water stress. But then in order to make sure that we're funding the right types of projects that align with local needs, we need more local data. And so we've hired consulting firms to do detailed basin diagnostics for us in each of those locations. And that information has been critical to ensure that we're not funding a water access and sanitation project in one place where actually we should be funding that in another, and maybe we should be funding leak detection here, but actually leaks aren't as big of an issue in this location as they are there. So that's been critical. And I think if that information was open source and available to everybody across every single basin, then companies wouldn't have to spend money to do that type of assessment, and instead more money could go directly into the projects. I think the time-consuming piece is a big one. I think when you've got a Nature Conservancy and these water funds, and I think Coca-Cola is the one who really worked with you guys to kick those off initially, right? And you need companies like that who are going to step up and who don't need to take credit for it, but are just going to do it because they know it needs to be done. And so I just want to acknowledge that. But we need more groups like that are building out these projects and bringing everybody together. We actually had a partners lunch earlier this week, our first annual one at Microsoft, for all of the different partners that we funded through our replenishment and access work, and there were about 40 representatives in the room from a number of different projects we funded. As of today, we've got about 75 or so replenishment projects in our portfolio, 10 plus access projects. And it was really interesting to talk about some of the challenges, and some of them linked to this. And one thing that was said that really stood out to me was, water is a shared challenge. We need a shared vision. And I think that just is the crux of some of the really big challenges we face with collective action, is when you have, TNC initiating a fund, you are creating this shared vision that's bringing everybody together. But really what we need is a shared vision for all of these key basins across the globe, so that when companies are funding projects in those basins, they understand this is the shared vision in this basin. This is what we all need to be doing. And I would love to see more funds that others are setting up, whether they be for-profit, nonprofit, that are bringing together a range of different partners, focusing in on policy, bringing together the public sector, finance, a range of different sectors, farmers, communities, with a shared vision. And I think companies would be excited to be at the table and be a part of that. And that takes a lot of time, effort, and funding. So I could say a lot more, but I'll just stop there and see which Michael I should pass it to next.
Thank you, Eliza.
The best Michael?
Thank you for passing it to me. So yeah, when I saw this list, I went, oh, God, that's going to send a message to everybody that it's hard work, and there's 28 responses there, and it's going to, basically be a barrier to people engaging in collective action, particularly those that are thinking about it, and they see all this list and they go, oh no. So first of all, I'd like to say that none of this is insurmountable, that we can tackle it, and it all resonates with me, unfortunately. It does resonate with me, and Diana did a great job of sort of painting a picture of how we go about our sourcing and development of collective action, and it's not easy. But folks shouldn't be put off by the fact that there's a lot there in terms of challenges. Maybe there's a next question about what the opportunities and what the positives are of collective action. And notwithstanding that, I think the interesting one on lack of trust is really important, and I touched on it very briefly earlier when I said we'd rather not be creating collective actions. Diana gets extra brownie points if she can find something that is already there, that we really want to go for, and that we can already attach ourselves to, because that by its very essence has got already other stakeholders involved. It's got government, it's got NGOs, it's got local civil society, it's got local projects, and it's got local companies. And that's a sweet spot, if you like, that we're looking for. And that with itself comes trust, okay? So there's trust already built up between the partners. There's trust about a business joining that because it's recognized that the business isn't dominating. It's not a business agenda, it's a catchment agenda. So I think that piece and trust is hugely important. It's soft, it's not really measurable, but we're very cognizant of it, and we'd rather not sort of be leading stuff. We see ourselves as catalysts. Their 2-year programs or whatever we'll step back from. It will be locally owned, locally driven, and locally developed. So I think that is hugely important to what we're doing. But unfortunately, there are gaps. So that's something, Eliza, you said, why can't we have shared visions and the equivalent of funds everywhere? And that would make all our lives a lot easier. But unfortunately, the reality is that's not true. And there is local context that's hugely important, because sometimes the solution is not always the same in every catchment, and it's not all a cookie cutter kind of approach to it. And that's a bit of a risk of global companies that have got it across 20 basins or 40 basins, that we take a kind of standardized approach to it and try and balance out that global perspective and that global reporting, that global resources you require for that versus what's important locally. And ultimately, the latter wins and always should win, but we need to be able to manage it globally. So I won't talk any longer. All I'd say is that hopefully we'll come to lots of positives. There are lots of challenges. All of those resonate. There was a 2-hour session that GWP arranged this morning, specifically focused on data, and that was great because there was public sector and private sector and scientists and all the clever people in the room saying this is what we need to do in data. So we all recognize that, but ultimately that trust piece is hugely important to actually getting stuff done on the ground.
And yeah, I'm not going to talk too much more about the challenges, because yes, in our collective action, I think I've hit on every single one of those. But again, as Michael said, they're not insurmountable. They're fully expected. To add to the trust thing, and this is more from, and I think any collective action project, but certainly in ag, having the trust of the growers, like having the trust of the farmers, is essential. And so we've, one of the back to the original question is, when do you bring in the public sector? When we started our collective action project in Canada, we started intentionally with just 4 corporates, because we didn't want to bring in the government. We didn't want to, whether it was provincial or federal or municipal, we didn't want to necessarily bring in an NGO and show up on a farmer's doorstep and say, hey, would you like all of these people to do water stewardship with you? I mean, that would not have sold very well. We had to build that trust over time. And I think once growers talk, and so in an area, if you have the trust and the trust is built from the ground up, trust is incredibly important, and business gets done at the speed of trust. So being willing to invest in that upfront, I think in agriculture, you have to start with the farm. In any collective action, again, you're gonna have to do some upfront investment. And there's been lots of conversations about that this week. That is a bit of a barrier, because companies don't always like to fund the startup. It is nice to be able to have something that's already set up and just plug into it, but that's not always there. So yeah, all of these are valid, so anyways.
So I want to touch on financing and continuity. So obviously the challenges that we are facing in a basin are massive, and therefore we need massive investment. And ideally, to make this sustainable and have continuity, there should be like a blended finance type of sustainability model. But also many companies have been only trying to address this through corporate social responsibility fundings, and I think that that's not enough. And that, of course, is why we need the collaboration of a lot. But I've shown Michael, like, with some images, like, we have like this system we call waterproof, where we can do like a really high-level analysis on what would happen if you add X amount of money to a basin and to different initiatives. And it's unfortunate because sometimes the needle doesn't move, right? So, like, okay, that's the funding that you have, but this won't really change many things. So that shows us that sometimes if you are actually trying to de-risk your company and your investments, you need to put more funding into these types of investments as well. And the continuity as well, like sometimes the funding is for 4 years or 3 years or 2 years, and that won't actually take us further than that. And many nature-based solutions need maintenance, right? So we can just plant the tree and leave it there. Like, we need actually to take care of the NBS that we are putting into the ground, and that requires long-term commitments.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all. It's great to hear that the challenges can be overcome. Before we kind of jump to solutions, we're going to ask the audience one more question and kind of ask you all to kind of look back and think about what you've done to date. So if we can hop back to the Menti, please. Sorry, really putting you to work over there for the last session. But the question is, what do you now know about collective action that you wish you knew when you started on your path to collective action? Same question will be coming to the panel as well afterwards. Or in other words, anything you would do differently now? You're having trouble accessing it? If you missed the QR code too at the beginning, you can follow the directions at the top of the screen to rejoin. So we have one, when to bring in the public sector, ideally from the beginning. Great. That collective action means stakeholder engagement. Engage more directly with funders. For example, bring them to the project. It's great. We'll kind of let you all keep answering and let those kind of trickle in. But why don't we kick things off? Mike, would you like to begin? What do you now know about collective action that you wish you knew at the beginning?
Besides getting legal agreements between competitors and peers, leave that one alone. That takes longer than I ever thought. But I think when you dive into collective action, there's one thing to kind of set the vision of the collective and sell that, and that's one thing. But internally within your company or organization as you're participating, there was, on some of the challenges, there was continuity in the business case. Selling that internally so that you're bringing your organization along with you, so that, because people have their day jobs. My day job seems to infringe on everybody else's day job in the company. And so I keep up on this stuff, but they might hear it, and then a year and a half later, they hear about it and wonder, so why are we doing this? What is this again? So really selling that and bringing the business case internally. And then just from a continuity standpoint is, as you do that, if your whole organization or at least your team and broader organization are involved and engaged, people leave, right? People move companies, people change jobs, they change roles. And so having that continuity and that the business case sold with, internally, those are two really big things to keep collective action projects, because again, they're not something that just happen and then after year one you're done. Mm-hmm. They take time to start up, they take time to build that trust, and so making sure that you're setting a long-term successful stage for that work is really important.
Great.
It's a really good question, and I love looking at the results here. I also like the progress over perfection. I just want to call that one out because I think in the water space in particular, there's a lot of discussion over that, right? Because if you want to get the actual results of exactly how much water was returned or how much water you could quantify from a water restoration project, you could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just doing that. But then at what cost? Then you wouldn't have as much money for a number of other projects. And so that's just something I feel like we could spend the next 30 minutes just talking about that, but don't worry, we won't. But one thing that stands out to me, and I think people know this, but I think through engaging more, it just stands out to me even more, is the importance of the on-the-ground partners who understand the challenges that are needed, and on-the-ground partners who you trust and are credible, and who you trust are going to build trust on the ground and build collaboration. When you're working at a big company and you have many different priority locations, we cannot be experts in each of those locations, and we should not be experts in each of those locations. And so really leaning on local partners, whether it be TNC, and not just these guys here, but local partners on the ground at TNC who focus in specifically on that basin every single day. That is so critical. And then, I see some of our partners in the audience here, all of you who really know the places and are bringing projects to us that align with that local context. I think that is just one of the most important parts of this, because if you have a partner that isn't able to do that and isn't able to bring people together and doesn't have that deep knowledge of the challenges on the ground, then the project is not going to be successful.
Yeah, a lot of this resonates with me. The three words that came to me was, if I look back and how long I've been doing it for, is compromise, time, and expectation. And those are the kind of three words that resonate with me. And for those who know me, I'm quite passionate about this, and I really wanted it to happen. I had my vision, and as I kind of rolled it out in the company, I sort of got a bit, oh, crikey, this is taking a long time, and they don't get it. They don't get it. Why don't they get it? And I just realized that how it materializes, the vision, the global vision, and the global kind of textbook, or my vision and my passion, needs to have compromise to have it make it happen on the ground. We've done that the whole time working with TNC. You know, it's going to end up this. Is it going to be this? No, we've got to adjust. We've got to move this. We've got to compromise. And it's a bit like the progress over perfection, really, isn't it? It's a similar point. And I think that kind of grassroots, again, the same point you said, local driven, locally owned, local passion. But my job in the company is to extend and convey that passion and engage with our teams to get them equally passionate about it and to really understand what the value is of why they should be taking all their time. And Diana and Michael worked a lot with our local teams as well, and they all say, oh, God, that guy, Michael's going to have a struggle there because that guy, well, that person's not very interested, you know. So we need to, that communication piece is hugely important to us, and to try and get it's got to be owned locally and driven locally. The time bit, oh my goodness, it takes so much more time than you think it's going to take. And again, I'm a bit impatient, but I recognize that actually, you know, you can achieve things, and it's worth starting. It's the point here. It's get started, worth starting. Even if it's not ideal, it doesn't match all the guides and the standards and the peers, just get started. And the expectation piece as well is manage your own expectations, manage the expectations of your business, manage the expectations of your local teams, because, you know, it is challenging. We showed the previous slide and all the different challenges that there are there. But yeah, those would be the three words I would use, but I think lots of that resonates with me. But equally, you know, if we build up, that's the beauty of this session, we build up that knowledge bank of what we should have known. It means that hopefully the successors of collective action leadership have an easier job, or there's more there for them to take advantage of.
Great, lots of lessons learned here. Thank you all for sharing your responses as well. So selling the business case internally sound pretty important. Progress over perfection, engaging the public sector early on, compromise, time, and expectations. Of course, please.
I would say that every collective action is different. So it's not a cookie cutter exercise. This week I've heard, or I've been asked a lot, like, so how long does it take? Like, how long does it take till it's running? And how does the governance work? And how does the financing, there's no one single answer. Unfortunately, it would be super easy, but it's not. Every context is different. Every challenge is different. Every basin is different. Every culture is different. So in one place, it can take months just building relationships, and other places it's super easy. So yeah, timing, patience, and just lowering the expectations that not every collective action is going to be the same or as easy or as complicated.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you for calling that out, Diana. It just adds to the challenging nature of collective action. It's just how you really have to adapt to each location specifically in project. Thank you. So if we can please advance to the next Menti slide. This will be the last question for you all. So shifting more towards the solution side of things. So what do you see as being necessary to overcome some of the challenges we have discussed today?
It's an easy question.
All right, so we're getting some matchmaking between NGOs and corporates, a sound business case, sustainable finances tied to a long-term vision. Start by starting, I like that. Local experience with proper funding. Please keep those responses flowing in, but Diana, would you like to kick us off with your thoughts?
Maybe I would add something that I was just talking with a colleague, but I've seen other companies tell me, like, let me know what Diageo is going to do, and maybe we'll do the same. So I don't know how you guys are on talking with other partners, like corporate partners. Like right now we have here the converted ones, but how about like reaching those the unconverted or the smaller organizations that maybe like aren't at your level, but those that don't yet understand, that are not sitting here. I think that's quite important, because they tell me that, like, tell me what they're going to do. And so yeah, that's advice for you guys.
Convert the unconverted. I like that. It's a good soundbite.
Proselytizing collective action.
I guess just picking up on the start by starting, it is good to start, and something I heard this week is maybe start where there's leadership. Michael mentioned it. It's really easy to plug into something that's already there, but there is lots going on in this space, and even just when you look at nature-based solutions accounting and trying to do full benefit accounting of everything, again, a very busy space, but there are certain areas where even if you don't, you're not sourcing from that farmer, or you're not operating in that particular watershed, you can always make your watershed or your province or your state a little bit bigger and say, this is still a region that's important for our business. So there's something going on there. We're going to make that important to us. And just kind of, as Michael said, shift your expectations. It's great to be able to say, these are our top 3 watersheds. Who's going to, join in with us on these, because these are important to us. Well, they might be 5 and 6 and 10 and 100 in terms of priority for everyone else. So it's just shifting that willingness to say, well, as a company, yeah, we want to make impact. We want to make a difference. And so in doing so, we're just going to, start where there's leadership, start where we can, and the rest will come later.
It's a great question. And this is the last one, right? Because there was another question you were toying with that was...
There might be one more coming up.
Oh, there might be one more, because I'm like, am I answering that question? Okay. So I think I'm going to stick to the sustainable finances piece here that someone put in. Sustainable finances tied to a long-term vision. I think we need more financing, more funding of all kinds in the water space, whether it's investing in equity or de-risking those equity investments that companies are putting in, or others through providing debt. If it's like developing funds that have a range of different investors that are coming in, there are so many different models that could be established. I would just love to see so much more of that. And I think all of that, I think ultimately the funding ends up driving a lot of the vision. And when you have larger funding sources with a shared vision, it can help push for that. And I think given I think if all the companies in the world with water goals and more companies set them, all picked one place where they were going to do collective action, we could make a big difference. And we need even more than that. And I think the financing is so key to getting the scale that we need that will take us even further beyond that.
I chose that one as well. So
Do you have the same?
I have the same views, yes. I think it's absolutely fundamental, which is why that kind of stood out. But they all stand out and they all resonate. And I wondered if I go back to Diana's point about learnings and sharing, and I look at a sound business case, and so we built up a very strong business case to increase investment in collective action, set ourselves a goal, and I just wonder whether there's something we can do, not just us, but with others of your partners. We could maybe do a short paper of some sort that says this is a business case, nothing else, and it's all about corporate perspectives. Often you get papers with lots of other different perspectives. I'm not saying it's just the right perspective, but if we're trying to persuade other corporates to start the journey in collective action, maybe we need to just do what you suggest, is being a little bit more collaborative about pulling our business case, because every business case looks a bit different depending what we're doing in the supply chains and what kind of category of business we are. But I think there's something material or something definite and specific that we can do perhaps to address that. It's not perfect, but we could do a 2-pager of some sort that said the business case for collective action from the perspective of corporates, something like that. So I do think that there's something about learnings and to get the steamroller going, to get the momentum going, to get a feeling that more and more people are doing it. It's not just the companies that've got the resources and the risk. The business case is the risk ultimately for businesses. It's the risk, but there is opportunity there, of course, as well. So I'm looking at that. And I'm thinking maybe we can have a chat about what we could do in the going forward in the future, and pulling together a sound business case. Just very simple bullet points on what we think is the reason why people should do collective action. But it all resonates, and there's probably a lot more we could pull together to make the case for more of that.
Yeah, I agree. Fantastic responses. Thank you all. Can we please shift one more time to the Q&A slide and then hop back to the PowerPoint? Great. So that concludes the panel discussion. Thank you all for participating in the Menti polls. We're going to hop to Q&A. So feel free to submit your questions via Menti or raise your hand and we'll bring a mic up to you as well. While we kind of give you a second to think of questions, one kind of final question for the panel. So why aren't others joining in collective action efforts? And what can we do to encourage other partners to join in collective action?
Do you want me to?
Please.
Do you want me to start because I got the mic? I think it was a point I nearly made earlier, but one of the points I was thinking is getting companies to think beyond their volumetric targets and their restoration. I think that's driven a lot of very good work, and it's a great starting point because it's measurable and it's specific to a company and it delivers specific results in terms of projects, and it's driving the right behaviors, I suppose. But we're finding now that companies are so focused on that, and their budgets are focused on just that sometimes there's nothing available to do the kind of unrestricted funding to get collective actions or to support collective actions. So we were certainly in that position 5 years ago, or three years ago. We've been lucky enough to make the business case for unrestricted funds for collective action in priority basins, and that's fantastic. But I'd love to see companies, as they develop their water strategies, and it's always an iteration, and everybody's talking about their new water strategy and what they're going to do and what's missing and what's going to come next. I think it would be great to see companies be encouraged to look at that beyond volumetric, beyond their own specific goals. I know it's really difficult. I've been around long enough to know that you've got to keep the paymaster happy at the top of the business, but equally, how do we make that business case for investing unrestricted funds in collective action that don't produce a volume, that don't necessarily always hit a target, but do have a very, very strong business case, and that business case being mitigating your climate and nature risk and growing your business. So I would really encourage that. I think that's probably something that needs to change a little bit if it can. It will take time, but by making the point and repeating the point, I think it hopefully will encourage companies to think about it at least.
Agreed. Can you share, because I hear a lot of companies talk about wanting to make that switch to look beyond just those volumetric water benefits, and you mentioned building that internal business case so you get that buy-in to support other projects. Can you share a little bit more about like how specifically you helped make the case? I know you said building climate resilience, but can you kind of paint a quick picture of what that looks like?
Yeah, we all do a kind of, well, we're obliged in some jurisdictions under the TCFD to do our climate, to disclose our climate risk. And we're asked to disclose the revenue at risk associated with climate risk. That's part of TCFD. So this is all reporting, right? So this is big stuff in terms of it has to be absolutely nailed to the ground in terms of accuracy and its disclosure requirements. And I think that drives a recognition in the business. The second bit of that is you disclose the revenue, and then you have to disclose what your adaptation measures are. How are you mitigating that risk of that revenue that you have just disclosed? Because you can't just say, this is the amount of risk and I'm doing nothing about it. So that requires you to do that. And that gets the thinking to say, well, what's our biggest risk? 9 times out of 10, it's water, drought or flooding. It's also heat. But so therefore, you're making the case within the context of what you're disclosing in your formal annual filings to say, well, what are the adaptations measure doing? Well, our adaptations measure are a water program. Principally, it might be our Regen Ag program as well, or our nature program. So once you've made that kind of connection with that kind of fiscal responsibility to disclose, then you're saying, well, what are we going to do locally? We're doing replenishment, and that's great, but that only takes us to a certain extent. Do we truly believe that by doing our replenishment projects, we are mitigating our climate risk, or is it just ticking a box to keep our investors happy? it's not going to do it, and they're not stupid. So you need to invest in collective action, and that's why I'm just describing the story of how I made the case to the business to say, you've got to go beyond this. Yes, we've been doing replenishment for 8 years, 7 years at a time. I need some funding, I need some resources, I need some leadership from the company to invest behind collective action. And we're not perfect, and there's probably other companies that are doing more and better than us, but it's all specific to the company. And I think if you can make that case internally to demonstrate that this is related to your climate risk, it's not about water per se, it's about your climate risk and about your supply chains and about the growth of your businesses in these vulnerable jurisdictions or vulnerable catchments. I think it's quite compelling. It takes time, but that's our story anyway.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael.
I'm going to answer a different question, which is on the screen. So I think it might be okay because there's a different question here, Michael, that you had put.
Sure.
So
yes, let's go with that one.
Said I would keep things spicy. This question is, if you had a magic wand, what is one thing you would change in the collective action space? And I'm just feeling like I want to dream really big right now at the end of World Water Week. So if I could wave my magic wand, I would ensure that there were a number of different funders, whether it be family offices, investors, new foundations, many that have billions of dollars just focused on water. Hey, if it's a magic wand, maybe we'll make it trillions. And the big focus of that would be setting up a basin fund in every single basin, maybe starting with high-stress basins across the globe. These could be more TNC funds. I'm not trying to set up competition for you guys, but like other funds as well that try many different types of models, funds that bring in a range of different types of investment, equity. It could get, funding from consumers, from farmers, from companies, replenishment dollars, bringing it all together. There could even be a return for some of those. And it would fund a range of different projects in different basins, from policy to water access and sanitation to other different types of nature-based solutions, all with a focus on a shared vision in each of those basins. And I would hope also that I'm just gonna keep dreaming here, guys, that there would be a few different pilots to see which type of fund is gonna work better, to then test those out, share learnings, and then they could scale so that there's one in every single basin. And that is my final wish at the end of this World Water Week.
I like it. Thank you.
Just quickly as to why people maybe aren't engaging in collective action, and Michael touched on it, but water is really cross-cutting, right? So whether you're looking at climate, biodiversity, nature, water, regen ag, soil health, whatever it is in the environment space, water's there. And so I think water, and those of us who've been working in this sector for a long time, we always think, well, water's the next big thing. Water's the next, it's time's coming. But at the end of the day, there's always competing priorities. So, first it was climate, and now with the nature agenda, biodiversity has all of a sudden just popped up, and everyone's really, you get investor questions, and it's nice that water has been framed as part of the nature discussion. But at the end of the day, with so many competing priorities, it's hard to get dedicated resources just for water, which I think goes back to the point of, it's a very busy space, but full benefit accounting is if you're able to tie into people's regen ag program or scope 3 emissions, it doesn't matter if you're a tech company, if you're a mining company, or you're in the agri-food value chain, you can invest on land-based solutions. Why? Because it ties to nature, it ties to water, it ties to biodiversity, but being able to make that more explicit, because I think when you're in the water world, we just assume that that's intuitive. You work at the watershed level, it's the whole watershed, but it's not. And so I think that's kind of the gap.
So I just want to quickly add, I think, crikey, this chair's going around. I just wanted to add, it's a super important point, and that's the kind of co-benefit piece we're talking about. I would mention also the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosure. So that's another stick that's coming our way. And that, for any food and bev company, and for many companies with agricultural supply chains, the biggest dependency and the biggest impact you have on nature is fresh water. And you're going to be required to disclose that risk in TNFD. So this is another business case for collective action, because it's outside your four walls of your operations. It's not something you can control. It's probably in your supply chain. It's probably downstream from your discharge of your water from your facility, or whatever it might be. But your biggest impact and dependency will be freshwater. That's why SBTN, I assume, started with their freshwater guidance as the first guidance on SBTN. And I think everybody recognizes just how important that is. And as you say, once you look into put it into that context, you're also measuring your biodiversity impact, your water impact, your carbon impact, and indeed the people impact, the livelihoods impact as well. So I just wanted to reiterate that TNFD is another stick, CSRD you could argue is another one, but these sticks are coming and they all add to the business case for investing in collective action.
Thank you, Michael. Diana, anything you'd like to add?
Maybe I'm gonna answer the magic wand question, the inspiring one. But I think if I could, and I would have a magic one, I would just like not to have to convince people that investing in nature is the best investment. It ticks all the boxes, even though the ones that we don't have to tick. And we spend our time working. I don't know how many business cases we've made in this year, but to convince people that this is a good investment, and yeah, that's what I would love not to have to do. Like just like it's logical, and yeah, that would be my magic one wish.
I love it. It's like you look at people. Deanna looks at people, and they all of a sudden are converted, and they believe. They believe.
Great. Well, thank you all. So let's go ahead and open it to questions. If you have a question in the audience, raise your hand. Perfect.
Hey there, great panel. This is John Sabo. I'm from Tulane University in the United States. And I also work in this space through a private sector company called Future H2OB. I want to put my academic hat on and just make a comment. And this is just an observation after listening. The TNC has 25 water funds, is that right? The right number, 25?
We're a little over 40.
40,
correct,
okay, that's even better.
We're trying to get partners to do it, though. So
and
we're not trying to compete. We want others to replicate the model.
And the best, Michael, has 30 collective action case studies that they're going to have to do. As a scientist, right, 30, isn't that the number? 20. Okay, you said 40, I got the number wrong, okay. So you got TNC's number right. The comment is, that's a normal sample size. I'm a scientist here. That's enough to do generality and to go to Deanna's point, I think, which was that everyone's different. There have to be some rules of thumb in those 70 case studies that we could draw from to simplify this process and make it a little bit more straightforward, right? And I think starting with the TNC water funds, I think would be a good place to do it. And you're probably already doing this. I don't want to steal your thunder, but great place to start.
Thank you for that suggestion. Diana, do you have anything to respond in terms of what you've done, analysis on water funds so far?
Yeah, thank you. And definitely, yeah, I agree. Like data is one of those things that's missing, and we are working on it. So that's the happy answer. We are working on it, and hopefully we'll have data soon.
Any other questions? We have one down here.
I'll ask mine.
Oh.
So I have the mic already. Sarah Traubel from Qantas. First, I wanted to congratulate you. My best session this entire week. So I thought this was really, really great. Thanks for all your insights. And I just had a quick question in terms of sustainability. Now, speaking in terms of time of these collective action initiatives, what have been your learnings there? Thank you.
Can you repeat it one more time? Best.
I spoke too fast, probably. What have been your learnings in terms of making these collective action initiatives last over time?
Learnings on collective action lasting over time. That was definitely a challenge. I think we saw it called out. So thank you for.
For us, from my experience in the work that we've been doing, it's keeping it relevant. Right, so I mean, Michael mentioned some of the sticks that are coming. How do you keep it relevant within your company to say, this is what we're doing and here's why? And then here's how it ties to next year's ambitions or goals or needs. So keeping it relevant within the company. And then this space is evolving, right? I mean, when you think back 5-10 years ago at the discussions that were being had here, they're very different than the discussions being had today. And I assume discussions 5 years from now will be very different than what we're having today. So keep it relevant.
All I was going to say is there's two kind of parties there, isn't it? It's sustainable for the business to keep investing in it, and there's sustainable for the actual initiative to keep going. And I think I completely agree with Mike. I think that demonstrating the continued value to the business, and that's just one perspective, obviously, but for continued investment is to articulate the value. And the more you can articulate the value with data, and the more co-benefits you can start to measure, and the more the business case for meeting some of your reporting requirements, for example, because CSRD and others are going to require you to measure these indicators in your supply chain if they're material. So I think the value piece for the business is important in order to sustain that continued finance beyond the first couple of years. I think for the initiative itself, it needs to have a clear business plan. And that's what we're trying to do. It has to have a 3 to 5 year business plan. It's probably the wrong word, business plan, strategic plan, whatever, but it needs to have the granularity in that plan to say, this is what our projected P&L looks like for the next 5 years as a collective action. And that P&L is also an environmental P&L, obviously. So I think it's really important to plan ahead. It's maybe stating the obvious, but I really think that having that kind of programmatic strategic outlook in a 3 to 5 year strategy or business plan is really important to sustaining the kind of support from businesses, but also the support from other stakeholders. It also means you're all aligned behind one vision. All the stakeholders have agreed to one vision, corporate, civil society, NGOs, business, government, whatever it might be, aligned to this kind of vision and this strategy.
Like from a water fund or watershed investment program perspective, I would say that to make this last and sustainable, you need a champion, like an owner of like this process that's going to really put the hat on, and hopefully a champion with a mandate, so an organization, a public organization that's going to take this on board, and also a sustainable financing model, of course. And the ideal scenario would be that this types of initiatives are funded through taxpayers, and that way is sustainable, and there's always investment coming for implementation, maintenance, monitoring, etc., or a blended finance mix where we have transfers from private and public sector.
Also echoing Sarah's, this has been a really helpful session today. Emma Clark from WaterAid. My question can largely be summarised as being around making it easier for different parties, both funders and local organisations, to say yes and to buy in. And it's been a really thought-provoking session around the potential for this water fund concept or vehicle to adapt to, one, being able to show the business case at a systemic level, so environmental, social, economic. And it's something that we're doing. We've been challenged to come to our partners along with the environmental NGOs to bring that whole package to show the wash, the conservation, and the water. So firstly that, and then the other was to look at the lens of, these are based on river basins, but if we build in aquifers, if we build in districts, communities, cities, how it could bring in that too. So there's various questions in one there, just to make your brains hurt.
I'll start with the easier question and then pass it off to the smart people. On the spatial scale one, I guess that was the last question, is, you have different boundaries. So I like to use the watershed boundary selfishly because it's easy, it's above ground. When you start getting into aquifers, again, it's a good boundary to look at, especially depending on where you are, because there are areas where groundwater is predominantly used, there's aquifer stress, and so you might need to go outside of the superficial watershed boundary. But yeah, even when you look at it from state lines or provincial lines, country lines, and even municipal, you need to, when you're looking at your watershed or your boundary, you need to make sure it's inclusive of the needs of the project, I guess. So it's something that needs to be looked at. And yeah, the aquifer one, we often forget about because it's easy to forget about because it's out of sight, out of mind, but certainly something that is a good reminder when we're in certain jurisdictions to think that way.
Yeah, on the Microsoft side, we do look to return water to the minor basin where possible. But we've been having a lot of I've been hearing a lot of things this week about the challenges with that, right? Because it can be really hard to find projects, but sometimes there could be a really powerful project that may not be in that minor basin, but is nearby or may benefit the community that you want to consider. And so that's something I think we all need to think about more. And I think you make a really interesting point. I think you said Emma, what's your name? About trying to build out projects that work for a wide range of groups. And I think that's something that many have been struggling with, especially when you pick a specific basin. You may have many different companies that are doing projects in India, but then trying to do that matchmaking and find, okay, but we're going to do in this basin, and so how many companies are interested in this one? So one thing I find it could be an interesting thing to consider is thinking through a specific type of project that you want to fund, and then say we can replicate exactly the same thing, and then say we're looking to do it in these 5 different basins, and then you can sell that and then hopefully get a broader interest from a wider group of people. But I think the other key piece is the metrics, and making sure that the key metrics that a company might need are available and they are claimable, because unfortunately, for better or for worse, we do have targets and we do need to make progress against those. But then also make it easy for others who don't need to make a specific claim to fund other pieces of that, whether it be the capacity building, or I just keep coming back to innovative financing and blended financing models and adding things like that into it as well. Here you go, Michael.
Yeah, just one thing to add, and I think it's relevant to the question. Is that in the vision of collective action, we're getting away just from about projects. We're talking about a master plan. So I'd love to see, let's take WaterAid. I'd love to see WaterAid being part of a collective action that is informing the collective action to engage with government to make the case for government investment in WASH, to prioritise investment in WASH. And that can be done through the collective action initiative, because you'll have the backing of the corporate and the civil society and NGO and others, and it'll be backed up by academia and data. So that collective action is not just looking at, yes, it's looking at NBS type projects on the ground, of course, but it's also looking at policy and influencing policy. It's also looking at capability. So how can we support government in regulation, enforcement of water-related legislation and the like? So I think if we think broadly, and then that's maybe a bit of a dream, and that's the perfect kind of theory, but I'd love to see the likes of different stakeholders being part of that with their own agenda, and that's really healthy in a collective action, and then putting it into a plan, as I mentioned, and then saying, yes, this collective action is going to go to government, or it's going to go to the regulator, or it's going to go to university to commission some new research on groundwater, aquifer health, or whatever. So it's not all just about the projects. The projects are important, of course they are, because they demonstrate the commitment and the action on the ground, but action can look different in different ways to support the long-term security of the basin.
Hi, thank you so much for a fantastic session. I'm Lainey Peterson. I work at Celeste, and we're working on a project management tool at the watershed level to be able to scale these kind of efforts. So really, this is the exact session. The question I have is, have you ever explored a plug-and-play approach where basically different stakeholders can come in and out and have much more flexibility, so that collective action has multiple lives as opposed to just one main session or one main set of goals? And if so, what learnings have you had? Thank you.
Thank you. And if we can maybe grab 2 more quick questions, we'll pull them all together and give, I just know we need to wrap up. I'm sure some of you have some planes to catch.
Hello, Monica Altamirano. I work partly for the Economic Commission of Latin America and the Caribbean, but I'm also part of this network Nature platform in Europe that is to scale up NBS. But my question and thinking about collective action, and now that you touched the discussion with engaging with the public sector, how much are you also willing to put people from your companies to engage in public investment planning processes, right? Because my life before, I was doing master plans for water security, and it's so difficult to get private sector engaged at that very early phase because there are no deals. But it's at that moment that you can make a difference, because maybe we don't need projects that are just publicly financed. Maybe you are smart to think on ways to create water storage capacity in a basin that doesn't need that subsidy. So if you're able to put people, experts available for those public investment planning processes, maybe a lot of things would be solved.
Thank you. And maybe I think we have one more question.
Hi, thanks for the great energy from the panel. My name is Hamish from Frankwater. We're doing collective action with Apple in India. Very quick question. I think partners are very important. I love partners, for example, that report their failures. So what's your dream partner on the ground to work with for collective action?
Thank you all. So 3 questions. Feel free to kind of pick and choose how you respond.
I'm going to respond to the second question. And sorry, I didn't pick up your name, but I'm super passionate about what you just said about engaging government on investment plans. We had a session with WaterAid and a dinner on Monday night. The sole focus of that 3-hour dinner, a long dinner, was focused on how do we engage government on policy, investment, and regulation. So we're completely kind of committed around that. What we also looked at was how do we mobilize as businesses, how do we mobilize our corporate relations, our corporate affairs teams around the world, of which there are many, in many cities and many governments, to engage with governments to make exactly that point. I don't think it's our role to in any way influence that inappropriately, but I think it is a really important point you make that without that master planning and without the input of those that are using the water, and it could apply equally to civil society and NGOs as other businesses, the collective action itself, that's the beauty of it, should be engaging with government. And hopefully it's a solution for the government that's doing that master planning, because all of a sudden they've got an entity to go to that is fair and is inclusive and is representative and is doing action on the ground and knows what it's doing. So I'm really, and within Diageo, we're developing a playbook, a program to see how we engage and how we do that. So any advice you have, because you've got lots of experience, I'd be delighted to hear, because it's a really important piece in terms of how we improve the security of those basins where we're operating.
I'm gonna go with the your ideal partner. I feel like now I'm on a matchmaking show or something. That's not what I intended to say. But finding partners on the ground is really critical, and it can be really challenging. I know there are tons of organizations that do really important work on the ground, but finding the right partner in the right part of the basin, doing the exact type of project you need, who understands the way that you need to report it out and the specific claim that you need to make to hit your target is hard, and it can take a lot of time to educate those partners to get up to speed. And so we've tried to develop resources that are available so that folks can understand the way that we need to be claiming benefits and the way that we're looking at our strategy and our projects. But I think for partners, I think we're looking for, obviously a partner who is credible, who has deep expertise and knowledge on the ground, and who we can go to with specific questions about what's going on, what could be improved upon, where we can ask questions like, how is environmental justice thought about or integrated into this project or not? But also looking for transparency, partners who can say, look, we're delayed and this is why we didn't get a permit, or we're struggling with this other piece, or our results weren't quite as great as we thought they were going to be, and this is why, and this is what we're doing to try to fix it. I think, just trying to embellish is not going to help anybody, right? I mean, we're all trying to figure this out together. And thank you for the question.
I guess to the first and the third questions. The first question, no, but an idea where you can plug and play, and something that, Michael mentioned it, time is a big thing. I spend a huge amount of time doing collective action and collaboration type work for the company because it feeds into what I need to be doing for Nutrien in my role, but it does take a lot of time. So if there's something, a program or something where that would be or could be facilitated, would love to talk, and so we can touch base after. And then the last question on partners. I was thinking about this, and I thought, well, it's nice to have names and brands that people acknowledge or know or understand, like household brands or household names. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who it is. I want partners who are all in, right? You can have silent partners that provide funds. They're not really there. They're not really participating. They're not bringing any value add. That's just money. I can find money anywhere. Well, I shouldn't say that. Money's easier to find than commitments. I was going to say, I just said the wrong thing. Money's easier to find than commitment. So I'd rather have a partner that's committed that maybe nobody's heard about. And I'll use an example is Simplot is, they are not a household name, but if you've ever eaten French fries at McDonald's or any fast food restaurant in the world, you've eaten their fries. So again, it's not so much who they are, but what they're willing to bring to the table.
Yeah. On the favorite partners, and again, like thinking on a watershed investment program, I'm gonna go with all of them because they're really needed. Sometimes it would be ideal just to have one and that's it, no more engagement. Unfortunately, all of them are needed, and if I go top to bottom, like you definitely need the communities on board. If you don't have the communities on board or the indigenous peoples in those basins on board, you might not have implementers, or the whole project can end there, basically, if they oppose. So it's really important to have them on board, and ideally for the project to be sustainable in the future, if you're talking about protection of, I don't know, wetlands, or the community needs to be involved as well. Privates bring resources, bring good ideas, and they have scale, and the public sector, again, has the mandate, has the resources, and sometimes can implement as well. So I think all of them are very important. And on the question on how do we bring the public sector on board, we've been doing it a lot through business cases, again, like trying to prove that nature is a good investment. Sometimes the business case is around what would they be reducing in expenses if they don't have to clean the dam, for example, dredge the dam. So again, like trying to prove it, it's how we've been engaging in some cases with the public sector. Yeah.
Thank you all, and thank you for your questions. Now to wrap us up in less than a minute, hopefully, Colin, over to you to share some closing remarks on what you heard today.
Well, thank you, Michael. And that is a mission impossible. Originally, I was going to speak for 3, but I'll get that down to 1 for you then. So just briefly, some challenges that were highlighted during this session were keywords: trust, data, vision, funding. From my perspective, business gets done at the speed of trust, said Mike, one of the mics, and having existing mechanisms really helps. But that needs to be beyond the project level, including but beyond, and ideally in the context of a master plan. And having a long-term vision, as one of the other points, is necessary. All stakeholders committing to that vision, but with flexibility. Data needs to be better, but we need to know that the corporate investors are getting what they need, but also knowing exactly how much data is enough and not looking for perfection. Focus on progress over perfection was the key phrase. Funding is a challenge. There's no magic bullet. A diversity of funding sources, obviously from the private sector, but much beyond as well. The good news is it's not insurmountable. It requires compromise and commitment in the long term. There are lessons learned from these early movers and shakers that we've heard today, and taking this further to engage other partners who could be contributing to collective action. I want to propose a final thought, which is a sort of meta collective action, not just at the watershed level, where of course it's very important, but how can we come together at a bigger scale where these lessons learned can be shared, business cases can be made, and in a way that engages a much higher number of stakeholders in collective action in the future. That's the mission impossible I leave us with. Let's hope that next year at the World Water Week, we can report back on the progress in that respect. Thank you, Michael. Back to you.
Fantastic summary. Thank you, Colin, and thank you, Michael, Eliza, Mike, Deanna, and all of you for joining today. We hope you found this session informative, and that you will leave today with some ideas to take back to overcome some of the challenges you're facing while engaging in collective action. If you have any questions or would like to get in touch with any of the speakers you heard from today, feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, thank you again for joining, and safe travels home. Thank you.